Whenever I visited Jerusalem, I always entered the Al-Aqsa Mosque, beside which stood a small mosque, which the Franks had converted into a church. When I used to enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which was occupied, the Templars would evacuate the little adjoining mosque so that I might pray in it. One day I entered this mosque, said Allah is great, and stood up in the act of praying, upon which one of the Franks rushed on me, got hold of me and turned my face eastward, saying, "This is the way thou shouldst pray." A group of Templars hastened to him, seized him, and repelled him from me. I resumed my prayer. The same man, while the others were otherwise busy, rushed once more on me and turned my face eastward, saying, "This is the way thou shouldst pray." The Templars again came in to him and expelled him. They apologized to me, saying, "This is a stranger who has only recently arrived from the land of the Franks, and he has never before seen anyone praying except eastward." Thereupon I said to myself, "I have had enough prayer." So I went out and have ever been surprised at the conduct of this devil of a man, at the change in the colour of his face, his trembling and his sentiment at the sight of one praying towards the Qibla. Third case illustrating their curious medicine is the following. A dignitary wrote to my uncle, asking him to dispatch a physician to treat certain sick persons among his people. My uncle sent him a Christian physician named Thabit. Thabit was absent but 10 days when he returned, so we said to him, "How quickly hast thou healed thy patients?" He said, "They brought before me a knight in whose leg an abscess had grown, and a woman afflicted with insanity. To the knight I applied a small poultice, until the abscess opened and became well, and the woman I put on diet and made her humour wet. Then a Frankish physician came to them and said, 'This man knows nothing about treating them.' He then said to the knight, 'Which wouldst thou prefer, living with one leg or dying with two?' The latter replied, 'Living with one leg.' The physician said, 'Bring me a strong knight and a sharp axe.' A knight came with the axe, and I was standing by. Then the physician laid the leg of the patient on a block of wood and bade the knight strike his leg with the axe and chop it off at one blow. Accordingly he struck it. While I was looking on, one blow, but the leg was not severed. He dealt another blow, upon which the marrow of the leg flowed out and the patient died on the spot. He then examined the woman and said, 'This is a woman in whose head there is a devil which has possessed her. Shave off her hair.' Accordingly they shaved it off, and the woman began once more to eat their ordinary diet, garlic and mustard. Her insanity took a turn for the worse. The physician then said, 'The devil has penetrated through her head.' He therefore took a razor, made a deep cruciform incision on it, peeled off the skin at the middle of the incision, until the bone of the skull was exposed, and rubbed it with salt. The woman also expired instantly. Thereupon I asked them whether my services were needed any longer, and when they replied in the negative, I returned home, having learned of their medicine what I knew not before. William, the Lord of Tiberias, narrated to us the following story in these words: "We had in our country a highly esteemed knight who was taken ill and was on the point of death. We thereupon came to one of our great priests and said to him, 'Come with us and examine so-and-so, the knight.' 'I will,' he replied, and walked along with us while we were assured in ourselves that if he would only lay his hand on him, the patient would recover. When the priest saw the patient, he said, 'Bring me some wax.' We fetched him a little wax, which he softened and shaped like the knuckles of fingers, and he stuck one in each nostril. The knight died on the spot. We said to him, 'He is dead.' 'Yes,' he replied, 'he was suffering great pain, so I closed up his nose so that he might die and get relief.' I once went in the company of Al-Amir Mu'in ad-Din, may Allah's mercy rest upon his soul, to Jerusalem. There a blind man, a Muslim who was still young and was well dressed, presented himself before Amir carrying fruits for him, and asked permission to be admitted into his service in Damascus. The Amir consented. I inquired about this man and was informed that his mother had been married to a Frank whom she had killed. Her son used to practice ruses against the Frankish pilgrims and cooperate with his mother in assassinating them. The Franks finally brought charges against him and tried his case according to the Frankish way of procedure. They installed a huge cask and filled it with water. Across it they set a board of wood. They then bound the arms of the man charged with the act, tied a rope around his shoulders, and dropped him into the cask, their idea being that in case he was innocent, he would sink in the water and they would then lift him up with the rope so that he might not die in the water. And in case he was guilty, he would not sink in the water. This man did his best to sink when they dropped him into the water, but he could not do it. So he had to submit to their sentence against him. May Allah's curse be upon them. They pierced his eyeballs with red-hot awls. Later, this same man arrived in Damascus. Alamir Mu'in ad-Din, may Allah's mercy rest upon his soul, assigned him a stipend large enough to meet all his needs, and said to a slave of his, "Order somebody to teach this man the Quran and something of Muslim jurisprudence." Hearing that, the blind man remarked, "May triumph and victory be thine. But this was never my thought." "What didst thou think I was going to do for thee?" asked Mu'in ad-Din. The blind man replied, "I thought thou wouldst give me a horse, a mule, and a suit of armour, and make me a knight." Mu'in ad-Din then said, "I never thought that a blind man could become a knight." The Franks are void of all zeal and jealousy for their women. One of them may be walking along with his wife. He meets another man who takes the wife by the hand and steps aside to converse with her, while the husband is standing on one side waiting for his wife to conclude the conversation. If she lingers too long for him, he leaves her alone with the conversant and goes away. Here is an illustration which I myself witnessed. When I used to visit, I always took lodging with a man named Muiz, whose home was a lodging house for the Muslims. The house had windows which opened to the road, and there stood opposite to it on the other side of the road a house belonging to a Frank who sold wine for the merchants. He would take some wine in a bottle and go around announcing it by shouting, "So and so, the merchant, has just opened a cask full of this wine. He who wants to buy some of it will find it in such and such a place." One day this Frank went home and found a man with his wife in the same bed. He asked him, "What could have made thee enter into my wife's room?" The man replied, "I was tired, so I went in to rest." "But how," asked he, "didst thou get into my bed?" The other replied, "I found a bed that was spread, so I slept in it." "But," said he, "my wife was sleeping together with thee." The other replied, "Well, the bed is hers. How could I therefore have prevented her from using her own bed?" "By the truth of my religion," said the husband, "if thou shouldst do it again, thou and I would have a quarrel." Such was for the Frank the entire expression of his disapproval and the limit of his jealousy.